Hello, Year 7. So welcome to the last lesson of the Circle of Life. So you've done all of the content now. This is just your revision lesson. So it's going to work the same way as the previous topic that you did. We're going to have some slides on content based on the Google quiz that you answered, and areas of where there's a little bit of weakness where you didn't do quite so well on the questions. Then we're going to look through the knowledge organizer, break it down into sections and do some self-quizzing on the knowledge organizer. And then if you want to, at the end, it's optional, you can make your own version of the knowledge organizer, which will make sure that you're remembering all of the content that we covered. So this is how we're going to improve your knowledge of the circle of life. So first of all, improvement questions. If we have a look at all of your 10 lessons here, if we have a look at the average scores each lesson and what this kind of equates to out of 10, you can see that you have done absolutely brilliantly. These scores are fantastic. I'm really, really impressed. So you should all be really happy with yourselves. You've obviously all got a really good knowledge of the circle of life. When I put out the Google quiz, obviously the show my homework quizzes are done directly after you've watched the video. When I sent out the Google quiz, there were a couple of areas of weakness. So I've designed the improvement slides next on those. So we're going to go over some content, and then there's just a couple of multiple choice questions. So the first area where there was a little bit of weakness was pyramids of numbers and pyramids of biomass. So if we have a look at this food chain here, okay, there's going to be an oak tree. Now, in a pyramid of numbers, that oak tree, there's only one of them. So this bottom level is going to be really small, okay, because there's only one of them. But from that one tree, there can be thousands of aphids feeding, okay? So pyramids of numbers don't always have a regular pyramid shape because our producer could just be one individual, like our individual tree here, okay? So a pyramid of numbers can look like this. It can look like a regular pyramid as well, but it can look like this because it's based on the number of individuals in that food chain, okay? So one tree can support many aphids, which is why it has this shape. And the width of each level shows the number of organisms. So we then talked about pyramids of biomass, okay? So this is the number of grams of the living organism in each of the levels. So this one always will have that regular pyramid shape because even though there's only one tree, think about how much that tree weighs in grams, okay, the mass of that tree. It's going to be huge compared to the mass of aphids. Even if there are thousands of aphids, the tree is going to be heavier, okay? So if we have a look at this comparison, this is our pyramid of biomass here. You can see it's a pyramid of biomass because it's got the units there, the kilograms, okay? That's showing that it is the number of grams of the living organisms at each level. And this is our pyramid of numbers. Sorry, is my dog barking in the background? This is our pyramid of numbers. Okay, so you can see that it's not got a regular pyramid shape because our producer, there's only 10 of them. So it's a much smaller level, okay? Shows the number of living organisms at each level of a food chain. So, like I said earlier, the pyramid of biomass always has that pyramid shape because there's going to, at each stage, there's going to be less mass to support, okay? So biomass is the number of grams of living things. And then in our pyramid of numbers, it sometimes has a pyramid shape, but not always, okay? Like in these examples. It shows the number of living organisms at each level. One large organism can support many smaller ones, okay? So which of these is false? You can see this pause symbol up here. You know that means to pause. Okay, so we're just going to pause this a second. Okay, so you should have had C. The pyramid of numbers always has a typical pyramid shape, okay? Remember, pyramid of numbers is saying the number of organisms at each level. So if there was that one tree at the bottom level, it's not a regular pyramid shape, okay? So that was the first area of weakness I picked up on. The second one was actually the adaptations of the leaf. So many of you did really well on the photosynthesis questions, and then you also did really well on the testing for starch and rates of photosynthesis. But the leaf adaptations, there were a couple of areas of weakness. So we're just going to talk about those. So the first adaptation, remember we said adaptation is what an organism has to make it do well in its environment, okay? So the first adaptation we can say about a leaf, they're large and flat, okay? So that gives them a big surface area. Obviously for photosynthesis, the leaf needs to absorb as much sunlight as possible. So if it's got a large surface area, it's going to have more sunlight hitting it, more of the sun's rays hitting it, okay? So it's going to be able to absorb more. Okay. They're also thin. So the benefit of them being thin is that when the gas that is needed for photosynthesis, carbon dioxide, comes from the surrounding air, it doesn't have that far to diffuse into the plant. It doesn't have a great distance to travel to get where it needs to go, okay, to get to the cells where photosynthesis is happening, okay, which we'll talk about in a minute. So leaves also have the midrib. Okay, the midrib is what gives it support. Okay, so if you go and look at a tree outside, if you have a look at the leaves, they're sturdiest around the midrib, okay, around the middle, and that keeps it supported, keeps it open, which obviously helps with its surface area. It also has these veins, okay. Now this was a question that a couple of people got a bit muddled up on, so they put that the veins support the leaf. Actually, if you feel a leaf, it's only the midrib that's quite firm. The rest of it is quite flexible, and that's because the veins actually are ensuring that the water is getting around the leaf rather than supporting it, okay? So the midrib, this bit in the middle, is the firm bit if you feel a leaf, and that's what's supporting the leaf, keeping it open and keeping it flat, okay? But the veins, these are more flexible, and their job is to ensure that all of the leaf is getting water, okay? Just like we've got veins to get blood around our bodies, the leaf has veins to get water around the plant, okay? So when we've talked about the diffusion of gas to go to the cells it needs to be, those cells are these palisade cells, okay? And they're at the top of the leaf, okay? They're at the top side of the leaf. So the top layer of the leaf is made up of a type of plant cell called the palisade cells, okay? And they're at the top of the leaf because that's where the sun is hitting the leaf, okay? So the sunlight hits the leaf at the top. That means that these palisade cells where photosynthesis is happening needs to be at the top, okay, to get all of the sunlight. Again, if you look at a leaf, normally it's less green on the underside than it is on the top. That's because the palisade cells have more chloroplasts, okay, and they've got more of this green color, okay. Because they get the most sunlight, palisade cells also have lots of chloroplasts, which is again an adaptation, in order to use as much of the sunlight as possible. So the chloroplast, remember, is where photosynthesis happens. And then at the bottom of the leaf, you can actually see this. So if you have a leaf, on the bottom of it, you can see, if you put some clear nail polish on the bottom of the leaf and hold it up, you can see all the little holes in the nail polish. And that's because there are holes in the underside of the leaf. So these are called stomata, okay? And they let in the carbon dioxide that's needed for photosynthesis. So around the leaf in the air will be the gases that are needed. they will go into the leaf through the stomata. And remember when we said that there's that the fact that the leaf is thin means that there's a shorter distance for diffusion. Well, the carbon dioxide needs to get to this top layer. So the fact that there's not that far to travel across the leaf for the gas to get from the stomata at the bottom to this top layer, that's beneficial. Okay. So you can see that pause symbol again. Just pause it a minute, read through and decide which is false. Okay, so your false answer should have been A, a large surface area means there is a smaller diffusion distance for gases. So it's the fact that the leaf is thin that there's a smaller diffusion distance for gases. The large surface area means that it can absorb more sunlight. Okay, so those were two main areas of weakness from that Google quiz. So we've gone over some content. We've done those two multiple choice questions for improvement. So let's have a look at the knowledge organizer now. So this is the knowledge organizer that has been made for this quiz. Okay, we're going to zoom in on each section. So we've got the 4 sections, and then we're going to do some self-quizzing on it. Okay, so you can pause this to look at this section. So this is section A. By all means, pause it, have a read through, make sure you understand everything. So if you pause it now. Okay, let's have a look at the questions based on this. So again, you can pause it. You can write these down if you want to. If you're going to make your own knowledge organizer, you don't have to write the answers down. If you're not going to, then I would suggest that you do. So pause this slide, have a read through, try and answer all of them. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers. Let's see how we've done. So what's a producer? A producer is an organism that produces food by photosynthesis. Okay, it's that bottom level of our food chain. What does the arrow in a food chain represent? So this was done really well in the Google quiz, so I'm sure lots of you have got this right. So it shows the transfer of energy. What shape does a pyramid of biomass have? It always has that regular pyramid shape. Okay, so we've gone through that content. Hopefully you've gotten that right now and you've improved. That would be brilliant. What is biomass? It's the amount of grams of a living organism. What does a pyramid of numbers show? It shows the number of organisms at each level. What's a primary consumer? It's the organism that eats the producer in a food chain. Okay. So section B, again, that pause symbol. Pause this for as long as you like. Try and take in all of that information. Okay, so pause it now. Okay, and then the questions for section B. Again, pause this, read through, take your time. So, the definition of a vertebrate is an animal with a spinal cord. An arthropod is an invertebrate with legs. An adaptation is a characteristic an individual has that benefits it in its habitat or its natural environment. What are the 5 groups of vertebrates? Okay, it's birds, mammals, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. What group does platypus belong to? It's mammals. Okay, it's one of those ones that we talked about where it has a beak and it lays eggs, so you would expect it to be a bird. But because it makes milk for its young, it's a mammal. And what are the invertebrates called with more than 3 pairs of legs? Okay, so these are arachnids and crustaceans. Remember, if they have 3 pairs of legs, they're insects. Okay, so I hope you've done really well on that section. Let's have a look at section C. So pause it, read through, try and take in as much as possible. This has got the adaptations on. So again, this is an area of weakness. So let's see if we can do really well on this section. Okay, so the questions: what are the reactants in photosynthesis? What else is needed for photosynthesis? What are 3 adaptations of a leaf? What does the xylem do? What does the phloem do? And how are palisade cells adapted? So the reactants in photosynthesis, the things that react together, are water and carbon dioxide. What else is needed for photosynthesis? Well, the other thing that's essential for photosynthesis, which is needed, is sunlight. 3 adaptations of a leaf. So there are more than 3. So you could have had anything from they're thin, they have veins, they have a midrib, they have palisade cells on the top of the leaf. And actually, I've missed out, they've got stomata on the bottom. So any 3 of those, give yourself a tick. What does the xylem do? It moves water from the root to the leaves. Remember, it only moves in that one direction. What does the phloem do? It moves sugar and minerals around the plants, okay? So it can move things from the leaves down to the roots as well, okay? How are palisade cells adapted? They have lots of chloroplasts, which is where the photosynthesis happens, okay? So if you've also said they're found at the top of the leaf, that's also an adaptation, so give yourself a tick. Okay, so hopefully we've done really well on that section after the improvement slides earlier. And then section D, so again, pause this, have a read through. You all did really well on these in the Google quiz that I sent out. So let's try and get full marks on this, okay? So if you pause that now and have a look through. Okay, so what's the positive test for starch? Why do plants have starch? How can we measure the rate of photosynthesis? When would a plant not contain starch? How is the chlorophyll removed from a plant? What are some rate limiting factors? Okay, so pause that and answer the questions. Okay, let's see how we've done. So you should have said that the positive test for starch is that iodine turns from orange-brown colour to a blue-black colour. Plants have starch because they need storage for when the plant can't carry out photosynthesis. We can measure the rate of photosynthesis by how much oxygen is given off by the plant. Okay, we talked about that, that practical that we can do. When would a plant not contain starch? Well, when it's used all of its stores, so when it's being kept in the dark. How is chlorophyll removed from a plant? You boil it in ethanol, okay, so that's what removes the green colour from the leaf, the chlorophyll. What are some rate limiting factors? So you could have said light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature. Those are all rate limiting factors. So that is the overall knowledge organizer. You can see it's split into 4 sections. So if you're now going to make your own, get a sheet of A4 paper, okay? This is the one from the previous topic. So get a sheet of A4 paper and make it blank, split it into 4 sections, and try and remember as much as you can from each of the sections, okay? It doesn't matter if it doesn't look the same. So it's not copying, it can be your own version, okay? If there's a point that you've remembered that you think should be in the knowledge organizer, put it in. It doesn't need to have exactly the same content, okay? So start with a blank piece of paper. Don't copy or look at the real one. Put in as much information as you can, okay? Really fill this page up so it's a really good revision resource. Go as fast as you can, okay? Don't worry about it. Don't stop and think. You don't have to look back at any work you may have done, written tasks. Just see how much you can actually remember, how much you've learnt and you're able to retain. It doesn't need to match the real one. It doesn't need to be particularly neat, as long as you can read it. If you can't remember everything, it doesn't matter. Just write what you do remember, because that'll show you what you have actually learned, okay? And then afterwards, you can it's again from the previous topic, but it's an example of another knowledge organizer. It shows that you can make it your own and you can design it however you like. Okay, so if you pause and make your own now. Okay, so you have done all of the 4 points on the revision checklist. So hopefully now you feel like you've really improved your knowledge of the circle of life. I'm sure you've done brilliantly on the improvement questions, on the self-quizzing. And if you have made your own knowledge organizer, I'm sure you've got a really, really good resource there that you can look back on in future. Okay, so well done, Year 7. I hope you've enjoyed the topic. I hope you enjoy the summer holidays because this is the last lesson of science before the summer. So have a brilliant summer and we will see you in September.